This video details GPS's guidance for replacing and upgrading the high voltage cables on the GPS iMOD. Before you get started, you will need the following tools and materials: a number 2 Phillips head screwdriver, a deep 7mm socket. If you are passing the high voltage cable through a surface, you will also need a power drill and step drill bits appropriate to the hole size needed, silicon sealant and cable glands for each side of the penetration. To confirm the product is functioning properly, you will need a true RMS voltmeter and a 1000-to-1 voltage step-down high voltage probe. If you do not have a high voltage probe, you will need a voltmeter with standard leads and a non-contact voltage pen. GPSA recommends that a Fluke 287, 289 or similar true RMS voltmeter and a BK Precision PR28A or similar high voltage probe are used to properly confirm the iMOD is functioning as intended. The use of alternative equipment may not yield reliable results, potentially leading to inaccurate conclusions regarding the product's operation. Therefore, verification of the voltage output from the iMOD power supply utilizing the proper test equipment will help ensure proper system performance. The process of upgrading the GPS iMOD will include the following steps. 1. Removing the original high voltage cable. 2. Testing the output of the iMOD power supply. 3. Installing the new high voltage cable on the power head. 4. Routing the new high voltage cable and installing standoffs from the power head to the power supply. 5. Passing the new high voltage cable through surfaces. 6. Installing the new high voltage cable on the power supply. And 7. Verifying the installation was successful. Step 1. Removing the original high voltage cable. Use caution when handling the GPS iMOD power supply, as it produces high voltage which can be dangerous if appropriate safety measures are not taken. To begin, power off the device. Disconnect input power from the device and follow appropriate lockout and tagout procedures. Next, remove the 4 machine screws holding the lid in place and remove the lid. Use caution when the internal components of the power supply are exposed. Do not make physical contact with the high voltage post or any other components until you have confirmed the power supply has been de-energized. If you have a high voltage probe, remove the nut from the grounding lug, then attach the grounding clamp of the high voltage probe. Be sure your voltmeter is set to AC. Use your voltmeter to confirm the power supply is de-energized by checking the voltage at the high voltage post. If you do not have a high voltage probe, use a voltmeter to check the inline voltage on the control board. Attach a wire to ground and use it to discharge any voltage on the transformer. Only proceed once you have verified the power supply is de-energized. Remove the acorn nut on top of the high voltage post. Use the deep 7mm socket to remove the top nut holding the ring terminal connector in place. Remove the ring terminal from the high voltage post. Disconnect the plastic nut from the cable gland and remove the cable from the power supply. Remove the screws that secure the back plate of the power head. Remove the back plate, then withdraw the high voltage cable from the power head. Step 2. Testing the output of the iMOD power supply. If you do not have a high voltage probe, you may skip this step. Use caution when checking the voltage on the GPS iMOD power supply, as it produces high voltage which can be dangerous if appropriate safety measures are not taken. Ensure that all the high voltage cables have been removed from the power supply before powering on the device. If you are installing a new power supply, refer to the IOM. Ensure the voltage selector switch is set to the proper voltage also referenced in the IOM. Return input power to the power supply. Power on the device. Place the voltage probe on the high voltage post. Verify the voltage is in the optimal 4.5 to 6.5 kV range. If the voltage is not within the expected range, please contact GPS tech support. Power off the device and remove the grounding clamp from the grounding lug. Disconnect input power from the power supply and follow lockout-tagout procedures. Step 3. Installing the new high-voltage cable on the power head. During installation, ensure the larger ring terminal connector goes to the power head and the smaller ring terminal connector goes to the power supply. The new cable will have a green indicator on the power supply side. Thread the cable through the power head assembly and tighten the retaining nut on the cable gland. Position the ring terminal connector on the post within the power head. Reinstall the back plate of the power head. Step 4. Routing the new high voltage cable and installing standoffs from the power head to the power supply. Install the standoffs along the route of the high voltage cable. The cable should be supported such that it does not come into contact with metal at any point along its length. To prevent the high voltage cable from contacting a metallic surface, install the standoffs no further than 18 inches apart. Do not coil any excess cable. Instead, route any excess in a serpentine pattern and ensure that bends are smooth with a minimum 3-inch radius. When there are multiple bars on one power supply, the cables from these bars can be secured to one another. However, they must not be interwoven or secured to any other type of wiring. Step 5. Passing the new high voltage cable through surfaces. If passing the high voltage cable through any surface, a grommet or cable gland will be required to protect the cable from sharp surfaces at the point of penetration. First, drill a hole appropriate to the size of cable gland you are using. If applicable, remove the pre-installed cable gland from the end of the cable with the smaller ring terminal connector. Feed the cable through the hole and attach the grommet and secure it to the surface. Use sealant to prevent air leakage and to secure the cable in place. If removed, ensure that you reinstall the cable gland that came with the high voltage cable. Step 6. Installing the new high voltage cable on the power supply. Use caution when handling the GPS iMOD power supply, as it produces high voltage which can be dangerous if appropriate safety measures are not taken. If you have a high voltage probe, attach the grounding clamp of the probe to the grounding lug of the power supply. Confirm the power supply is still de-energized by checking the high voltage post with the voltmeter. If you do not have a high voltage probe, use a voltmeter to check the inline voltage on the control board. Attach a wire to ground and use the wire to discharge any voltage on the transformer. Only proceed when you have verified the power supply is de-energized. Thread the high voltage cable through the port of the power supply and secure the retaining nut of the cable gland. Place the ring terminal connector onto the high voltage post. Reinstall the top nut and secure it using the deep 7mm socket. Ensure you do not over-torque the top nut, as this can damage the product. Reinstall the acorn nut. Place the lid back onto the power supply and secure with 4 machine screws. Step 7. Verifying the installation was successful. Use caution when checking the voltage of the GPS iMOD, as this produces high voltage which can be dangerous if appropriate safety measures are not taken. Do not make physical contact with the emitters or high voltage post within the power supply with anything except the high voltage probe. When using a non-contact voltage pen, maintain a minimum 2-inch clearance. If you have a high voltage probe, attach the probe's grounding clamp to the grounding lug. Return input power to the power supply. Power on the device. Place the voltage probe on the high voltage post. Verify the voltage is in the optimal 4.5 to 6.5 kV range. Power off the device. Place the lid back onto the power supply and secure with 4 machine screws. Power on the device. Place the high voltage probe onto one of the emitters of each bar Verify the voltage is in the optimal 4.5 to 6.5 kV range. If you do not have a high voltage probe, use a non-contact voltage pen to test to see if the electric field from the iMOD is present. If the voltage is not within the expected range, or the non-contact voltage pen is not detecting an electrical field, contact GPS technical support. Power off the device. Remove the grounding clamp from the grounding lug and reinstall the nut on the grounding lug. To complete the installation, turn the power supply back on. Thank you for watching. If you have any additional questions, please contact GPS technical support.